Welcome to the Holocaust podcast. This is class number 14 in the discourse called Machlokes 5672. And we are now which is the sixth discourse in the overall book, Bishosha Ekdimu. And we are now holding over here class. We're now today's going to be the last class, Be'ezrat Hashem, in chapter 24, concluding chapter 24, the general discourse. Okay, so the question that we were holding by like the second explanation of why, when you separate the one of the potentials, if you might say, of the 10 sphirot, of the 10 hidden spheros, why you lose the Or Klali, why you lose the general light. So his question was that since we're not dealing with vessels, if we would be dealing with vessels, if the 10 hidden spheres would be vessels like the opinion of the Ramak, then it would make sense, because when you take away a vessel, a piece of a vessel, then and separate it from the rest of the greater, like if you take a sleeve off from the rest of the garment, then the general human being cannot dress in it anymore, right? He could put his hand in if he needs a sleeve. When do you have a person ever needing just a sleeve? When does a person have to have just a sleeve? Generally, you don't have that. So it no more is suitable for the human to dress in it. But when the sleeve, even though it's the same exact sleeve, when the sleeve was part of a greater dress, so then the person can dress in that dress or in the suit, then the person can wear the suit, the entire person can go into it. So the same as over here, where you break away one of the letters. But that is as long as we're talking about if the sphirot would be kalim, vessels to a light. But now that we've explained according to the Ari, and this is the opinion, or this is the idea that he's following and accepting to be the truth, so to speak, the ultimate emes, that the 10 hidden spheres are even in the lights. So the light is the light. What kind of light is enclosed in the light? The light is the light. So one answer he gave, that even if you're looking at pure light, sometimes the light is actualizing its pnimius. The pnimius of the light comes forth, which means the innermost of the light is shining, and sometimes the very same light shines only bechitzonius, only externally. And that would be the difference, that if you keep the potentials of the lights, all the futuristic possible leanings of this light all together in the source, that allows for the pnimius of the light, the innermost of the light, to shine, even if there's no vessels over here. Just because all the potential of the light is still shining as an Or Klali, as a general light, so that sets the tone, so to speak, for the light to shine with all of its brightness. Once you're starting to pull away a part of the light, so to speak, and highlighting a particular aspect of that light, then not only are you losing the other 9, in our case, the other 9 potentials, but even more so, the general pnimius light, the innermost of that light dims and is not really present, and all you have is an external element of the light. Okay, that was his first explanation. But then, in his second explanation that we started learning, is that in a subtle way, even when we're talking just about lights, before we come to Kalim, there is a thin membrane, so to speak, on the lights, that every light has to have in order for it to serve as a conductor of that light, to conduct it towards a vessel. And he introduces a whole new concept over here called levushim, that between the light and the keli, between the Or and keli, there is a levush, and that levush is, so to speak, hidden in the light. It's not pure light. It's definitely not the vessel, and it's meant to help the light settle into the vessel. That's the garment of the light. Now, those garments, we can understand since it's like a vessel in the sense that therefore we can say that it's when all these garments are together. Using a good term of garment, now it would be applicable what we said earlier, that when you have the garments together, and in this case, maybe the example I was using for earlier regarding kalim, I should have not used the example of the garment, because here is where the garment would be perfect, because we're not talking about vessels. The vessels are much, what we might say, much coarser, far more, even the vessels in the highest levels compared to these levushim, they're much coarser. But this levush, when the light, before the light expresses itself into one particular expression, like before the light of Chachma individualizes is itself as Chachma, then the garment of Chachma, the garment that comes along with that light, as we're going to reread that inside now and explain that, was together with all the other garments that are hidden, that inevitably have to be there. The garment that would serve as the facilitator of the Bina, and the garment that would serve as the facilitator and the connector of the light of Chesed, to connect to the Keli of Chesed. If all these lights would still be unified together, then they allow for a much higher dimension of the light to be presented in these garments. But once you separate the light of Chachma, you differentiate the potential into the 10 different potentials. That is going to cause these levushim, these hidden, quiet, silent, benign levushim, to garments, to become each one distinct and separated, and therefore there is now, you lose the or klali, you lose the general light, and you just get individualized energies that can go into each individual garment, but only that, and not the greater persona, the greater light is not available. So in other words, he created an element of kalim, even in the lights. It's that same idea. That even in lights there is a tinge of kalim. Now let's read that inside. Let's go back. We can explain this whole concept that between the lights and the vessels there is another inyan, and he refers to those garments as shemos, as names. Every light also has a name, and the name is not the light itself, is not the energy itself. It's already a very subtle keli, which he refers to over here as a shame, as a name. In general, we said that the root of the lights is Havaya, which is indicative of pure energy. Past, present, and future above. It's above all definitions, it's above all characterizations. That's why it's completely above time and space. But at the same time, we know that Havaya itself is nuanced. That's what he's going to say now. Havaya is nuanced. How can Havaya be nuanced if the whole idea of Havaya is that it's above all nuances? Where do we see that Havaya is nuanced? Because we know Kabbalistically that the name Havaya appears in various different sphirot. Although it's always talking about the light, not of the vessels. The vessels are not Shem Havaya. It's not the tetragrammaton or other names. We're talking about the lights. And yet we say that when the light is in Chachma, in Keser, for example, the light, the Or Ein Sof, is still in the level of Keser. We refer to it as Havaya, but then we put the Nekudot that are under it are Kamats. And then when the very same, which makes it a sound, when you take the very same Havaya and it enters into the sphere of Chachma, we're referring to the light, the Or, as it is in Chachma, then it becomes suddenly a Pasach, a Patach, which is a different pronunciation to the Havaya. And then when it moves into the next, it changes. Segol is, he said in Bina, I think he said, is a Segol. We'll see it soon, yeah. No, he doesn't. He just states by that. That's why I didn't remember it, because he didn't bring it over here. That's one differentiation in the lights. And then there's a second differentiation in the lights, besides for the Nekudot that are there. Now let's just stop for a moment. That itself is already telling you that there is a shinoi in the light. There is a change in the light. Now what is changing? The light are lights. The light is the same light. How is it changing? And that is because, the reason it's changing is because of the lavush. The Nekudot are not part of the Havaya. They are the lavush. They're the garment to the Havai. And one can object and can say, listen here, maybe these nekudos are different because the light of Chachma and the light of Bina are different too. Because even though we said Oiros Apshutim, didn't we learn over here that even in Esesphiris Agnuza there is already, the light is already preconditioned to express Chachma. So maybe that's why there's a difference. But I'm thinking, then the Shinoi should be in the Yud Kei Vav Kei itself. Because the Yud Kei Vav Kei Shem Havaya, and then the Shinoi should be in the letters themselves. Since the Shinoi is not in the letters, but the Shinoi is in the difference, when I'm saying the differentiate is in the kudos, seems to be that there's something there in addition to in addition to the light itself, in which over there is a change when the Havaya is manifesting in the various different sphirot. And that's because it now has a different garment. Another indication to the same idea, he brings from another aspect, not from the nekuda is changing in each sphera, but from the miloi changing. What's the miloi? Inside the letters are hidden letters. That's one of the famous ideas in Kabbalistic literature, that inside every letter are hidden other letters. So a yud, for instance, has a vav and a daled hidden in it. It's called oisias hamilui. There's the letter of the yud itself, and then there is the vav and the daled, because the sound of yud, there's the D sound, let's say, very easily heard in the yud. Where is that? How does that enter to the yud? The yud is just yeah. It's the Y sound. How does the D sound come over there? That's because a yud really has a daled in it. But when you look at the Torah and you see the letter yud, you're not seeing the daled because the daled is hidden. Fine. And then there is, and the hey. Okay. So in Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Arizal speaks of, there's primarily 4 different types of miluyim, different letters that you can fill into the Yud Kei Vav Kei, which make that the gematria, the numeric value of the Yud Kei Vav Kei, if you count the hidden letters that are standing behind, changes. So, for example, one time Yud Kei Vav Kei, the value of it is 72. Let's choose very quickly. How do you get Shem Ayin Beis? Is as follows: you fill the Yud Kei Vav Kei only with Yuds. What does that mean? The Vav and the Yud never changes. Yud is always Vav, Yud Vav Daled, but the Hey Vav and the latter Hey are always filled with a Yud. Hey is Hey Yud. Vav, interesting, even though it doesn't sound like it, is Vav Yud Vav, and the Hey is Hey Yud. If you do the gematria of those letters, you're going to get 72. So, and then sometimes it's 63, and you'll make a slight change. Instead of the Yud, instead of the Vav being, everything remains the same like in 72, but the Vav, instead of it being a Yud, becomes an Aleph. So it's Aleph, then you lose 9 numbers. So from 72, it becomes 63. Okay, just giving you an example. So it says in the result that when the Yud Kei Vav Kei is in Chachma, if you the hidden letters that are there make up the value of 72. If it's in Bina, it's 63. So now the question is, where is that change happening? It's not in the light. The change is, again, that's what he's explaining over. The change is in the name. This is all related to the name. The name is already the garment. So even the kudos, the vowelizations, they're in the garments. And the hidden letters, the milui letters, they're also related to the garments. But in general, the Yud Kei Vav Kei remains the same or, but the garments are different. There he's leading us to the point that when you break, when all the 10 hidden spheres of the Yud Kei Vav Kei were all together, so they all formed one garment. And then the light was able to be much stronger in this garment. But once Hashem, through the Tzimtzum, actualized each one of these 10 spheres independently, that made that each garment came forth as a separate garment. And then when a sleeve becomes only a sleeve without being attached to the suit, then the person who's dressing in it is not dressed there anymore. So you lose the Or Klali. That's what he's explaining. Okay, so let's read it inside. And I know that there's difference in the nikudim. In Kesser, the Shem Havaya has a nikudim of kamatz. In Chachma, in wisdom, it's with the patach. V'gam, another difference we find. Yesh b'chachma shem and beis. In chachma there is the number of 72. Ubebina shem samach gimel, and in bina there's 63. V'yadua, it is known. And it is known that the shemois, these names that are different, these are garments to the light. Perek, Reish Ayin Aleph, in chapter 271, I guess he's going to elaborate on this idea. And what's the function of these garments? This allows for the light and the vessel to attach itself. Like we find. Shema Adam, he's going to give an example by a human being. The name of a person, the Nere B'chush. A human being is made up of a soul and a body. Now, the body is the vessel, the soul is the energy, okay, is the oir. Okay. Now, we know that there is some other feature over here, and that's a name of a person. Now, for most people, we would think a name is just pretty random. You choose to call yourself by a name, it has nothing to do with who you really are. But we know by examining the intense reaction that a person has to their name, this is a indication. This is an external indication. Now, Chassidus is not building it because of this. It's using it as a proof, but Chassidus knows that this is the way it is because it knows this is the way it is. It's not like this is proves that this is it, and this is how we take out this idea. This is how Chassidus, this is how the Maimer, this is how the Rebbe knew this idea. The Alter Rebbe or whatever. It's because he knew it in essence, but this shows us this truth because you see how instantaneous and how deep it is. So when a person's name is called, how no matter what they're doing, it jolts them. A name jolts us very strongly. So you have to say that a name. For example, if you're in the airport and your name is being called, in 1 second you turn around. But even more than that, you're walking on the street, you're engrossed in a deep conversation, and from across the street someone says, "Hey, Joey," you turn an instant. You'll stop whatever you're doing and you turn. And that's because they're actually tinkering with your soul. They're actually like it's not even just related to the body. It's actually touching. A name of a person touches on the energy of the person's soul. So we might say that the name is your neshama, that the soul itself, the name is somehow related to a description of your soul is your name. We know that Arizal says that parents are gifted with Ruach HaKodesh, with a certain divine inspiration, to be able to name their children. A parent has to give the right name to a child. And we also know that so you have to pick a right name. And we also know that it's very, very serious to meddle with a name. You don't change names. However, when someone is ill, then sometimes you add a name to a person. And that is also showing us that somehow the name is connected to the soul itself. But let's understand that. We cannot say, he says, it's the soul itself. The name, we might think it's related to the soul itself, but it's not. Where do we see that? Let's see as he explains it. We see we see that the name is related to a person's chayus, to your life force. It's not just a random external thing that people decided to call you that way. Now, where do you see that? When you call a person by his name, if it would be superficial, and if it would be just an external label that was placed, a sticker, if we say it would be just a sticker that is stuck onto a person at a very young age, then we shouldn't have such an instant, powerful reaction. But he says the main thing he's emphasizing is afilu tarut, even when a person is very occupied. When someone calls him, instantly, especially if you don't recognize who's calling you. If shouldn't say if it's your spouse nagging you, you're not sticking your head out of it because she wants you to load the dishwasher. You might not jump like that. But if it's like sudden when you weren't expecting it, that's the point. And your name is called instantly, no matter what a person is doing, you turn around. If you do it is also known, and to emphasize that even stronger. Shegam b'salfus gedayla. We even find that when a person faints. Usually when a person sleeps, let's start a little bit. When a person is sleeping, one of the ways to wake a person up when they're not waking up is to call them by their name. that helps, that wakes a person. You whisper their name. You say, hey. By calling someone's name, someone will say, okay, it's a pleasant way to wake someone up. Instead of pouring cold water on them or to jolt them or whatever, call them by their name. No, but there's something about the name. Now, you see it even stronger when a person faints, and hitting them and poking them doesn't wake them up, but calling them by their name can pull them out even from a deep faint. By calling their name, you can return them back to themselves. So you see that the name, if it would be an external label, it wouldn't reach a person when they're fainted. However, this is also understood, and this is the point. The name is not one's intelligence, which means your neshama, your soul. It's interesting how he says sichla. I mean, we know that the soul is made up of 10 powers, or not made up, but contains within itself 10 powers, intellect and emotion. And that's kind of considered the soul itself, the nefesh itself. So we would think in addition to that, it has 10 powers, but it also has a name. No. And he proves that it's not, because intellect and emotion is part of the hardware of the soul itself. Even before you were born in a body, you had intelligence and emotion. Obviously, the intelligence and the emotion of a person when they're in heaven is not limited by the limitations of the body, but it's still in the intellect and the emotion, and still unique to this individual. The way we think, the way we intellectualize, the way our mind works, and the way our emotions work, while we're enclosed in bodies, is similar and reflective of our souls in heaven before they came down. It's not like it's a new person. It's not like you get created. Obviously, your environment, your education, all these imprint and forge and form a person. But it has to be consistent with the essential person of who you really are, with the makeup of your soul, the character of your midos, and so on and so forth. But name is not that way. Why? That before the soul comes into a body, doesn't need a name. And in heaven, when the soul is called by that name, if you're named Yankel, and the soul is called by the name Yankel in heaven before the soul ever came down in a body, the soul will not respond. It won't even stare, because the name it doesn't have a name yet, which means the name Yankel or the name Joey or whatever name you're giving someone is not applicable to the soul when the soul is in heaven. Like it says on Likutei Torah in Bamidbar, Perek Aleph, Machlokes, it says, it says in Genesis that in Bereshit it says that Adam was calling names for all the creatures. God gave Adam the job to name everything. So Adam went around he gave a name to every creature. And then the Torah says that man did not find a helpmate, which is referring to a wife. So how come? Well, we know that. Therefore, God put him to sleep and got him a wife. Well, the question is, why is the story of Adam not having a wife connected to where it says that he doesn't have a name? That he named all the creatures, and then it says it. It should be an independent story. What's it related to that? The answer is when it says he didn't have a helper, Ezer also means he didn't have a name. Like Matzah Ezer, he didn't find his name. And he explains that what that means. But what do you see from here? That means that essentially, on a neshama, what that really means is this is applied on a mystical level. On a mystical level, a soul, before it's connected to a body, doesn't have a name. The Ezer hu Hashem. The Ezer, the assistant, is the name. What is it assisting? It's assisting in grounding a soul to a body. A soul, before it came down into the body, does not have a name. When it comes into a body, it needs a name. Why? Because the soul is so abstract and so holy and so spiritual. Body is so physical. And a spiritual soul and a physical body, in general, it's an impossibility that the two of them merge to the point that they become one. So we know it's actually one of God's wonders. It's an impossibility that God does a wonder, that he unifies spirit and matter in a way that it becomes a person. It shouldn't happen. But the manner in which Hashem makes it happen is through the letters of the name. And the letters of the name are like a garment. In other words, they're very spiritual, and they're similar to the energy, but they're less than the soul itself. It's like an external energy that serves as a suit, as a enclothement. It's like a little denser than the soul itself. And the soul clothes itself in its name, in the letters of its name, and that comes down. And when the parents name their child, God gives them that wisdom to understand and appreciate the connection of body and soul. It's that particular mediator. The name of the person is to mediate, is that the parents get to truly identify the mediating garment that mediates and facilitates the soul attaching itself to the physical. Now it makes a lot of sense why when a person is very ill, we add another name. Because if, for whatever reason, the channel of life from their soul to their body is becoming very weakened, that's what it means that a person is very, very ill and they're almost leaving their body. So we want them, perhaps by adding a name, we want to open up a new facilitator, like getting a new garment, and maybe, in other words, to repipe this connection, so that now there's be fresh piping. So now or rewiring. So now be fresh wires. So now maybe we can capture that electricity to run through, the power will run through this new wiring. That's the idea of adding a name. But again, it's something that should never be played with, because when you're calling by a person by a new name or naming them, especially if you're naming it by a Torah, you can be really messing them up. So this is not something that you take lightly. One should really, really consult. Sometimes people feel their mazel isn't good and they go and they name themselves another name. The great tzaddikim frowned upon that a lot. It's not something that you pay a makubal a couple of dollars and he just opens you up a new name. No, definitely not monkey business. It's too very serious. You don't do engineering on your soul and on your name. But that's just what it is. V'hainu, and that is actually when it comes into a body, it needs a sricha hashem. It needs the name to bond the light with the vessel. So just like it is with the person's name, that the name is so what was the question? Is like this. So where is this name of a person before the person? He said that the neshama doesn't need a name. Does that mean that the name is not there at all? Obviously, the name is hidden inside the soul. I said earlier, when they would call the soul by its name, the soul will not react to it before it's named, and when it comes down in the body, is because it's so concealed in the soul that the soul itself doesn't know its own name. It doesn't need it in heaven. Maybe souls are identified by a barcode. I'm not exactly sure how they identify the soul. But when the soul comes down in the body, it's through the letters of the name. Very good. So now let's apply the same concept to God. Because God creates the world and made us in his image. So everything that there is, we use the human experience as an example and a metaphor for the divine. Because in creation, the world is the vessel. And the sphirot, the vessels, they're the vessels. It's considered the body. And then the Or Ein Sof, including the Esespheres Agnuzos, that's the soul, that's the Or. And between the two of them runs the names. And that's the names, the concept of names of Hashem. Now before the Or Ein Sof, that's before the Tzimtzum, since we said earlier, all the roots of all the lights are there, all integrated as one. That's the concept of the 10 hidden spheres. In Hashemois, the Oirois, the Esespheres. The names of the lights of the Esespheres, although there's no Kalim there yet, but a garment is really there in a state of Hiskalalos, in a state of very, 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 very hidden beingness. Even the Spheros are hidden. For sure, the names of the Spheros are absolutely untapped and unknown, but they're there. The Masha Omar, like it says elsewhere, that it says, there's a statement in maybe it's in Sefer Habo'ir, I think, which is a book from the great sage Rabbi Nechunya ben Akon. I think that's where it comes from. It says, before the worlds were created, that God and his name was one, implying that God had a name before he created the world. And in Chassidus it explains, we're talking about even before the Tzimtzum. Even before the world was created, if you trace world to the world's very, very beginning, it's the first Tzimtzum. Because that's called world, because that's what creates hell and concealment. So before the first symptom, God was and his name. However, his name was not divisible from him. The name was completely one with him. But it's interesting, it doesn't say names. Doesn't God have so many names? It should say him and his names were one. Why is it only one name? And the answer is, since the lights, whatever is going to later be manifesting and producing all these various names, but these lights were still in a state of iskalos, which means they were all unified as one without detectability of these 10 spheros individually. That's why they're called genuzais, completely hidden. So therefore, what will later become many names were all, just like the light itself was one light, all the names was one name. As he explains over here, this is in the Orin Seif, koidem alois aratzain, before Hashem. No. Actually, he's saying even higher than that. Here it's only one name. It's not many names integrated as one. It's just from the very beginning one name. What is that? Because remember, the 10 spheres hagnuzais, the 10 hidden spheres, is not the natural state of the Or Ein Sof. The natural state of the Or Ein Sof is that the Or, remember we learned earlier, has infinite spherot. It has without an end attributes. And all those attributes are utterly pashut, as we learned, utterly simple, but infinite potential of infinite spheres. So, if there is, and even in there is names. But there it's only one name. Because even though it's infinite spheres, but the infinite spheres, each one would be exactly the same like the other. Although it's infinite spheres. It's hard to understand why is it called infinite spheres that they're all exactly the same? Because it's absolutely pashut. So on that level, it's only one name. Then, the moment Hashem had a will within the Or Ein Sof, arose a will to create worlds. So as we discussed earlier, he narrows the Or Ein Sof potential, so to speak, to a potential for 10. And that's already the Esespheres Hagnuzos. Automatically now he has 10 names. But those 10 names are all crafted together because the lights are all together. And because all these names are all crafted together like one suit, they can facilitate a higher light. Once, however, Hashem introduces the tzimtzum, the contraction, and differentiates the lights, along with that is the differentiation of the names, and that's where we lose the Or Klali, the general light. That's what he's explaining. It's one name. Like we said earlier, chapter 17, the before the will arose, the spheres are without an end, in a state of utter simplicity. But when Hashem's will arose, what happens? Now he has a will to create, so he already potentializes, he brings forth he narrows the Or down to a hidden potential for 10 spheres, because we discussed, he's thinking already about an audience, he's thinking already about a recipient, so he has to design the light a little more. Then it becomes already, the spheres are already 10 spheres, so the names have to be already 10. Then it's names, still in a level of bilvad, because you can't notice anything, but the names are there, but it's already many names. And in the names we can say, now he concludes the answer to the question. When all these names are unified together, a deeper light is shining in them, but through the division of it, the light becomes weakened and lessened. Kitzer, let's do the quick kitzer. He asks the question, how do you give an example from letters which are kalim for the roots of the lights? And the answer is twofold. Answer, even in the light, there is the inner element of the light and the external element of the light. That's number one. And when the lights are together, the more inner aspect of them is shining. And when they differentiate, a more external element of them shines. Then a second reason, or second explanation, it's relating to the names. The Balois Aratzon, when the Aratzon arises, it becomes many, but they are together. And when they get divided, the light inside of them gets very, very much diminished. Okay, with this we concluded Mazel Tov chapter 24, and we will start tomorrow, chapter 25. Let Mashiach be here today.